The taiga lay silent that day. The air was heavy, saturated with the thick aroma of rotten pine needles and damp moss. The silence was not the ringing silence of dawn, but an oppressive, stormy silence. It was the calm that always comes before the world collapses. Gamekeeper Ivan Belov could feel the tension in his skin. He wasn't just walking through his territory, he was reading the forest. And today the pages were disturbing. He was checking the salt licks when it hit him. Not a sound, but a rupture in the very fabric of existence. It was a roar. But not the roar of rage or defiance that he had heard hundreds of times during the rut. It was a panicked, broken cry full of primal terror, a sound that could only be made by someone who had seen the death of their child. Ivan's heart sank. Dropping everything, he stopped hiding and ran headlong through the thick spruce forest, breaking branches. Instincts honed over decades screamed at him that he was already too late. That sound was agony. A final farewell. He stumbled out onto the edge of a small clearing bathed in dim light and froze, breathing heavily. The scene that unfolded before him was worse than he could have imagined. It was not a tragedy that had already happened. It was a tragedy that was unfolding right now, and time had stopped in it. In the middle of the clearing, at the foot of a short but sturdy spreading cedar tree, sat the owner, a huge brown bear. He was thin, angry, and his eyes burned with a hungry, impatient fire. He did not growl or fuss. He waited methodically. On the tree, on one of the lower but thick branches, pressed against the trunk as if it wanted to become part of it, a moose calf trembled, very small, born this year. Its long, awkward legs trembled, and it emitted a quiet, plaintive, almost cat-like squeak. It couldn't climb higher, and it couldn't climb down. And 10 meters from the cedar, in the open space she stood, the mother, a huge moose, the embodiment of power and wild grace. But now there was no trace of grace left. Her fur stood on end, her sides heaved heavily, and foam dripped from her lips. She dug at the ground with her front hoof, knocking out clumps of moss. She was trapped. It was a perfect, devilish stalemate. The bear stood between her and her child. Every attempt she made to rush toward the tree was met with a low, threatening growl from the bear, who immediately rose, showing that he was ready to fight. And the moose knew that she could not defeat the bear in a fight, but she couldn't leave either. And so she ran around in this 10-meter circle of hell, losing strength and sanity, while her calf cried in the tree and the bear calmly waited for her to either fall from exhaustion or make a fatal mistake. And at that moment, all three noticed Ivan. There was complete silence, except for the squeaking of the fawn and the heavy breathing of the two giants. The bear turned its massive head toward Ivan, its lips twisted into a silent snarl. There was no fear of humans in its eyes, only annoyance, another contender for what he considered his rightful prey. He let out a low, rumbling sound that rolled across the ground and struck Ivan in the soles of his feet. "Don't come any closer. It's mine." The fawn, seeing the new creature, clung to the branch even more desperately. But the moose, her reaction violated all the laws Ivan knew. Decades of experience told him that a mother protecting her young does not distinguish between predators, humans, wolves, bears, all enemies. She should have either attacked Ivan or tucked her tail between her legs and rushed into the thicket to save her life. She did neither. She took a step to the side so she could see both of them, the bear by the cedar tree and the man at the edge of the clearing. Her huge, black, tear-filled eyes rested on Ivan. She stared at him for a long time, without looking away, and there was no longer any anger in that gaze. It contained something Ivan had never seen in the eyes of a wild animal before. It contained a plea. She looked at the bear, then back at Ivan, and she made a sound. Not a roar, not a scream, a quiet, guttural, pleading moan. It was an impossible, unthinkable calculation. In her wild, maternal brain, gripped by panic, she made a choice. She saw not two enemies. She saw one enemy and one last, ghostly hope. Defying all instincts, she asked for help from the one she should have feared as much as the bear. Ivan understood. The blood drained from his face. He ceased to be a gamekeeper. He ceased to be an observer. The doe's gaze made him a participant. He found himself between a rock and a hard place, between two giants, each of whom could kill him with a single blow. He slowly took the rifle from his shoulder. The bear tensed and rose to its paws. Ivan shook his head. No, shooting would be madness. A wounded bear is 100 times worse. And who should he shoot? The bear? The moose, who in her desperation might also charge. His hand slipped into his backpack, feeling for the cold, ribbed cylinder. A flare. Fire. The only thing everyone fears. But to use it, he had to get closer. He had to distract the bear. "All right, Mother," whispered Ivan, not knowing if she could hear him. "I'll try." He took his first step onto the clearing, slowly, openly, without hiding. The bear reacted immediately. He saw Ivan as an easier and more daring threat. He turned toward him, baring his yellow fangs. He forgot about the fawn. Here he was, a human, walking right into his paws. The moose froze, catching her breath. Ivan took another step. 10 meters to the bear, 15 to the moose. He was in the center of a deadly triangle. He pulled the flare out of his backpack. "Go away!" Ivan yelled, and his own voice sounded strange and hoarse to him. He struck the boy. A deafening, hissing crack split the silence. In the next second, a pillar of blinding, poisonous red fire and acrid smoke shot into the sky. The effect was instantaneous. For a wild animal, it was something unheard of. Fire from the sky, pain, noise. All the bear's instincts screamed in terror. It was witchcraft. It was unnatural. He roared, but this time there was panic in his roar. He backed away, stumbled. The fire hissed, and Ivan, without lowering his arms, went straight for him. The bear couldn't take it. He turned around, and all his vaunted power turned into a cowardly retreat. He rushed into the thicket, crushing the bushes, and a second later, only the crackling of receding branches could be heard in the forest. Silence. Only Ivan remained in the clearing, with a smouldering, smoking flare in his hand, and the smell of sulfur in the air. The gamekeeper lowered his hand. He was shaking. He slowly turned his head. The moose stood in the same spot. She hadn't run away. She was looking at him. Her sides were still heaving, but her gaze was clear. She made a soft, low, cooing sound as she looked at the cedar tree. And the calf, hearing her, finally made up its mind. He clumsily slid down the trunk, his legs spread apart on the wet grass, and he staggered toward his mother. He bumped into her belly, and she immediately began to lick him feverishly, pushing him with her nose, checking to see if he was okay. Ivan slowly backed away toward the forest, making no sudden movements. His work was done. He was superfluous at this reunion. He had almost disappeared behind the trees when the moose raised her head. She and her calf were ready to leave, but she did not leave. She looked straight at Ivan, across the clearing. Her gaze was long, heavy, and incredibly meaningful. She was no longer a frightened victim. She was once again the mistress of this forest, and she let out a loud cry that echoed throughout the forest. It was neither a roar nor a moan. It was a pure, clear, coppery sound, the sound with which her ancestors greeted the sun. There was no fear in it, nor was there gratitude as humans understand it. There was something more. It was an acknowledgement of power. An acknowledgement that on this day, in this place, one law of the Taiga had been broken, so that another, more ancient law, the law of life, could prevail. Ivan nodded silently in response. The moose turned around, and in a moment she and her calf disappeared into the green gloom of the thicket, as if they had never been there. And Ivan Belov remained alone in the clearing, which smelled of sulfur and miracles.